Welcome to Harvest to Pour, the business of beverages, with your host, Matthew Shipp. This is the podcast for all of those who are involved in the agriculture all the way to the distribution of beverages. And now your host, Matthew Shipp.
Hello and welcome to Harvest to Pour. I'm your host, Matthew Shipp, and today I am here with Matt Hayes, founder and CEO of Bridging Tables. Bridging Tables is reimagining the specialty coffee market to create new opportunities for buyers, growers, importers, and service providers through direct trade, innovative pre-financing, service provider management, and community. Matt, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Matthew. Glad to be here.
Thanks again for being here. So let us know a little bit about yourself, Matt, where you came from, what started the idea behind Bridging Tables, and where you find yourself today.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Matt Hayes. I'm the founder and CEO of Bridging Tables. What we do effectively is we're really trying to add value and reduce friction across the supply chain for coffee, specialty coffee. And, how I got here is really a much longer story, which it sounds like we'll probably jump into a little bit today. But effectively, I was fortunate enough to spend a whole lot of time and make a bunch of friends across the emerging markets, and those relationships and working towards creating mutually beneficial solutions across markets is what's led me to Bridging Tables.
All right. So what inspired you to move into the coffee industry from, where were you beforehand?
Yeah, no. Thanks for the question. So beforehand, I was an executive recruiter. So I served, companies as large as Microsoft, as small as Series A startups, helping them to find their C-suite leaders. Mm-hmm. So I was a recruiter really focused on helping to identify, define, strengthen, and grow leadership. But my backdrop into coffee, how I got into coffee, like I mentioned, I was very fortunate to spend some time in emerging markets in my early 20s and then throughout my 30s. And those friendships that I formed really through Catholic missions, honestly, helped me, those never went away, right? And a handful of conversations with three of those friends, one in Liberia, West Africa, one in Haiti, and one in Honduras, all kind of coinciding within a month's time, led us to this question of, one, realizing that there was an extreme need and an opportunity to create better business practices or a market-based solution that could provide better opportunities for farmers by solving roasters or their buyers' greatest needs. And, for me, I was constantly in awe of the talent that I saw in these emerging markets, these incredible people that were really experts in their craft, had access to some fantastic resources, but really just lacked access or a seat at the table. And so we stepped into starting to ask questions around how can that be done? How are things done currently? And then where are needs and opportunities that we can step into more fully? And that's led us a long way. But effectively, that's what led me into coffee. It wasn't so much, that I have had this long tenured experience in coffee. It was more of friends and community and relationships that has led me into coffee.
You just mentioned emerging markets, and are you talking from the farmer, the roaster side, or just the whole economic ecosystem of coffee?
Yeah, when I'm saying, and that's a great opportunity for clarification. When I'm saying emerging markets, I'm really talking about origin countries. So the countries which are providing the raw materials or the actual seed, the actual grain of coffee. So these are countries typically found in between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn. So, kind of close to the equator and yet still have access to good altitude as well.
Okay. And what challenges were you finding they were having?
Yes. There's all different kinds of challenges, but the ones that we lasered in on was really access to market and access to capital, to financing. So the way that coffee has moved from origin to roaster and then ultimately to the consumer hasn't changed a whole heck of a lot over the last few hundred years. Mm-hmm. And, really that's because of things that are very understandable. Barriers to finance, barriers to language, barriers of geography. And really you can find anywhere between 5 and 15 people in between the grower and the end consumer. And so we saw there's a significant opportunity to bring those two primary end users, the roaster and the grower, more closely together. So to allow them to own their relationship a lot more directly, and then also to in order to do so, we knew that we had to solve a true business crux, which is how do we answer and provide an opportunity for both of their needs because they're very different, right?
Let's talk about that, those
Yeah.
differences between the two needs. That was what kind of leading up to my next question was, what are you seeing? What are the roasters not getting from the producers and what are the producers not getting from the roasters? Where was that disconnect?
Yeah. So what's interesting is it's not that they're not getting something in the traditional way that we think about it, right? I
Okay.
mean, they are getting the access to the goods that they're looking for, but
Mhm.
they're hungry for more and the consumers are hungry for more. One, when it comes to understanding where my coffee is coming from, what makes it special, who's producing it, all those kinds of things. More of this, as consumers are becoming more conscious, there's this desire to tell a story, this desire to allow whatever it is in a specialty format, this artisan element of this craft.
Mhm.
So the ownership of the relationship is something that oftentimes hasn't been accessible from the roaster standpoint. So the capacity to, one, I may have gotten to know my farmer, but to have that relationship ungated, meaning that it's truly your relationship and it's not tied to a particular vendor, is something that is not nearly as in existence as it is today, or can be as it is today. The other element is cash flow, right? So roasters are a inventory based business. And when you're thinking about procuring a good or kind of your raw ingredient that can last you for 4, 5, 6 months, even a year, maybe that bulk, that large of an order, you really want to finance that over terms to be able
Mhm.
to recoup your cash flow, to be able to run your business as optimally as possible. And so there's just real need for being able to have access to contracts, know the consistency of what my raw ingredient is, what these core coffees for my offerings are going to be. And at the same time, I may not have the liquidity to be able to put all that cash up front. And so the
Mhm.
industry right now operates a lot in these finance terms for the roaster. So we knew we needed to be able to provide that at a basic element. And then the farmer side of things, farmers are very resilient and they're
Mhm.
constantly coming up with new ways, kind of forced in many terms to combat things like the changing elements of their climate, wherever they find themselves, the market terms, right? So both end users are really tied to the volatility of the C market. But in terms of the farmer basis, they really need all that cash up front. When they relinquish the possession of their good, they need to be able to pay off their lines of credit, pay their laborers, be able to take care of their crops and prepare for the next season. That's very capital intensive. So when they relinquish their goods, they need to be able to recoup that cost. And so you have the producers who need money immediately upon the releasing of those funds, and the roasters who want to have access to those funds, but need to pay it over the course of 6 months, 9 months, a year,
Mhm.
right? And so really what we saw as an opportunity is if we can translate the coffee into a true asset, right? Then
Okay.
what we can do through contracting is be able to give the roaster the access to terms they need while paying the farmer much quicker than before. And because of the streamlined effect of how we're operating as well, we're able to provide farmers sometimes up to an increase in 400% of gross profit margin while reducing the cost from a financing
Wow.
perspective for the roasters anywhere between 10 and 15%. And that's strictly on the mechanics of the operation. That's not additional savings that they can provide through all the business efficiencies that they're gaining too.
So would it be safe to say you're bridging the gap between the financial literacy between the farmers and the buyers?
Yeah, bridging the gap of education, no doubt,
Education.
bridging the gap of kind of business and how it's operating, how it's running, and then also bridging the gap to the access to those relationships. Again, oftentimes, nobody has set out to be a malicious player, but there are a number of people in the middle that, based on the nature of how the industry has operated and have needed to operate it for so
Mhm.
long, all the dynamics that are at play within the current system, you have a myriad of people who are in effect gatekeeping, and
Mhm.
not, again, not out of malicious reasons, but just by the nature of the business. And so our main emphasis of bridging early on, and still is our core emphasis in today's frame and in our frame in the future, is how do we bridge the opportunity for direct connection? How do we bridge the opportunity to turn a relationship that once maybe was more transactional into a teammate, and allow, you know, any farmer or any producer, no matter how big they are or where they are in the world, access to those efficiencies that can be provided in direct trade. So direct trade, just to be clear, people managing their relationships, being able to forge relationships at origin and in countries that are procuring this raw ingredient to coffee. Those kinds of relationships have existed for some time, but it's taken a very large amount of purchasing power to be able to pull that off. So what our emphasis was on is how do we allow not just the estate owner the ability to do that, but the smallholder farmer, which makes up the vast majority of the supply chain of our coffee.
Okay. And so you said this direct connect ability to tell stories. How are you negotiating like making sure that the producer, or not the producer, the roaster and the farmer are actually speaking, or I want to make sure I paint the right picture here, or are you just helping them speak both sides of the financial advantages they can have from each other?
It's kind of a 1 foot, 2 foot approach, Matthew. So when we first started this, it was very much, we were connecting people via WhatsApp and allowing them to have those negotiations. And then also we were able to help negotiate too. So we saw our role as more facilitators at first. And this, when you're building something, you're kind of just putting 1 foot in front of the other. So the beginning iteration was really more or less introducing people to one another and allowing them to own the relationship, and then providing the support and the service alongside to help them fulfill that. Over time, we are developing the technology that allows them to communicate with live translation in moment, right?
Perfect. Okay.
So that's not out today, but that's
yeah. Coming. So I won't write the picture. You are really getting them face to face in so many ways to talk and hash this out, and you're working as, like I said, I like the facilitator, because I was looking at and making notes. I'm thinking, well, it's not broker, because they have those now, and that's maybe part of the problem, or it's part of the, you said the nature of the industry allowed these people to gatekeep a bit, and so you're kind of not overstepping, but you're making this not negotiation, this transaction much more friendly to both sides.
I would say a much more fluid way, right? Because the way that you need to the way we can all think about it is that, again, all of the people that are in play within the industry right now are solving a need. They're there. Their business is there because there's a need, and they've provided a service. And our real goal with Bridging Tables was not to be a disintermediator, right? Not to cut, a ton of people out, but it's really to identify who are the key stakeholders that are providing value, and how do we reduce friction, add value for them. And what that looks like for us is particularly 3 key people. 1, the farmer or the producer. 2, the mill or the exporter. And 3rd, the roaster. So with the model that we've kind of laid out in a typical format, and maybe it would help if I took a step back, right, and explained how the supply chain actually operates and what the processing of coffee looks like. I know that you've spoken to a myriad of different professionals, and so you may have already done this on the podcast before, but I know I'm one of the first. Go ahead.
I think from your perspective, I think that might be very helpful.
Sure. Yeah. I'm always someone who needs to be reminded a whole heck of a lot. So I think it's maybe worth it. So when you think about coffee, let's start with the basics. Coffee it's a tree, right? It's a shrub that produces a fruit. Within that fruit is a seed. The way that we get our coffee is, first, it is cultivated, it's grown, it's groomed, then it is picked. Those cherries are picked. They then go through a myriad of processes. The first is getting it to the stage of fermentation. So coffee needs to be fermented for a certain amount of time, and there's a variety of different processes that it can go through. Probably the most recognizable for the vast majority of our networks is going to be washed coffee or natural coffee, sometimes a honey processed coffee. Again, there's a wide variety of other fermentation processes and methods, but those 3 are probably the most widely known. At that stage, it's then dried for a period of time. And then it goes through, when it's being prepared for exportation, a dry mill, which at the dry mill, the outer layer of that seed is more or less like a shell, a papery shell, similar to like a peanut, right? And you have to hull or process that shell off of the bean, which is the grain bean that then gets exported. A roaster buys the green bean and then roasts it hopefully brown, not black, so that we can then consume it as the end consumer, right? In that process, you have the farmer, which is typically taking care of, again, the cultivation. They're overseeing the picking. Oftentimes, they're overseeing fermentation processes. In the vast majority of the supply, more often than not, you have, especially in the commercial market, farmers that are producing and then picking, but then handing over cherry to be processed by a co-op or an aggregator of some sorts, who then is further processing the coffee and then is moving it to a dry mill facility or to an exporter or a mill or a co-op to then take care of those latter phases of the opportunity or of the movement of the actual coffee. So I want to give that backdrop first. And so at that point in time, you could have maybe changed hands upwards of 5 times just there, right? And how those translations are coming across. Then as you get to the export side, it's then handed over again. Then an importer is going to take it over and bring it into the country that it is being imported into to be sold, whether that be in Asia, whether that be in Europe, whether that be in North America, what have you. And then from there, it could be traded again. It could be sold again to another agent who then would sell it to a roaster, who's then going to roast the coffee, provide it either in a cafe or to a wholesale account or to e-commerce or wherever it may be, and to where it makes its hands into the end consumer. So for the purposes of that framework, I want to focus in on 3 core components: the producer, the mill, who's then making that final processing and exportation, and then the roaster. And so when you think about the flow of both how things are handed from one individual to the next, and then how the money is handed from one individual to the next, it can get kind of complicated and over leveraged because, again, our 2 end users have different needs, right? The roaster needs to pay on terms and the farmer needs to be paid up front. And so the way that that's happened for the last few hundred years is all those points along the way are taking out lines of credit or taking out cash, then procure the coffee from the next person, the next person, the next person, right? So sometimes that can be, leveraged 3 to 5 times. And our goal is to bring it down to 1 point of leveraging. And what that 1 point of leveraging does by connecting the 2 end users directly is it also allows us to give the mill something that they haven't ever really accessed before, which is free cost of capital for their core business, which is actually processing the coffee, right?
Okay.
So instead of them having to take out a line of credit to be able to procure that coffee as it has been done, and then process it, and then sell it and wait for terms, and maybe their terms are they get paid 90 days out after they shipped it. Maybe their terms are they get a 25% down payment, and then the rest when the boat lands. There's a wide variety of terms. We can definitively pay at FOB. And then furthermore, we can potentially, based on the circumstance, be able to provide the capital up front for them to procure the parchment to then process it and move it forth. What that does is it allows that business, that mill, that exporter, if they're one and the same person, the capacity to grow and serve a lot more people without having to tap into their line of credit, which historically is going to be at significantly higher rates than what we're able to offer them, which is, very, very limited cost of capital.
All right. So you definitely provide them a money saving, but doesn't hold up the process system.
Yeah. So it's enabling them to do their core business
Mm-hmm.
without having to take out undue cash to do that.
Okay. All right. And now a word from our sponsors. If you're serious about building a smarter beverage business, you need to know about Debbie Waldrick Consulting. Debbie brings decades of real-world experience from managing 7-Eleven's $4 billion beverage portfolio to guiding startups at mid-stage brands through the scaling process. At Debbie Waldrick Consulting, you'll get practical insights from fixing margin leaks to building the right sales team. Debbie helps brands like yours make smarter moves at a critical stage of growth. Whether you're just getting traction or hitting new roadblocks in your business's growth, Debbie Waldrick Consulting brings clarity to the process and helps you grow the smart way. Visit DebbieWaldrick.com to learn more. Make your next move your smartest one with Debbie Waldrick Consulting. Hey, are you spinning your wheels trying to figure out What will really boost your business's bottom line? At Emberry Solutions, our Profit Priority Workshop is here to cut through the noise. We help you zero in on what truly matters, aligning your team, optimizing your processes, and magnifying your profits. Imagine your business running smoother than ever, with every decision and effort leading straight to increased profits. That's what focusing on the right priorities can do. Ready to boost your efficiency and profits? Visit Emberry Solutions and let's start making your business work smarter. At Emberry Solutions, we take your business from bottlenecks to breakthroughs. So, what strategies or strategic decisions do the farmer and the roaster, your two end users, need to make together typically?
So it depends on their relationship. Oftentimes they're making guesses in the dark, but I'll laser focus in on each individual decisions that they're making, especially against our current backdrop. And then I'll kind of tie into, as your question kind of alludes to, how do they do it together? And what are the opportunities they have together? So right now, the market has been very volatile. As the nature of the market, it is volatile. It goes up, it goes down. But the last 24 months specifically, we've seen a lot of dynamics that have made it increasingly volatile. One, with supply being lower than it has been, while demand is increasing more than ever. So you have those variables that are taking into account where, in the course of the last 6 or 8 months, over the last year, we saw the coffee price double, right? So it went from $2 up to $4. It's hovering around $3.45 at the time of us having this conversation right now, but it's gone up and down pretty significantly. So one of the major challenges that they face together is understanding and forecasting, what are my true costs? What are my true prices that I'm going to be making? How am I going to sell this coffee and have any kind of understanding of sell or buy, and be able to predict what my true costs are for the length of this duration. Because right now it's often when I need it or when I'm out, I'm having to make decisions so I can buy it in a spot capacity, or I can buy forward contracts, which is where I'm locking into a price for, a certain duration of term, and I can predict that price. So for the roasters, I would say one of the first things that one of the challenges they're facing right now is a limited supply, very volatile costs. So my supply is in question, at least in terms of what it used to be previously. My costs are higher. And there's also the implementation of tariffs, right? So we've had a lot of volatility around tariffs. What are the charges that are going to be incurring upon this coffee? So that's another increase of cost. Those are the recent challenges. There have always been challenges of quality, of consistency, of predictability. Things of this nature have always been challenges as you're trying to maintain and build relationships, as you're trying to maintain a core product, et cetera. For the farmer side, again, it boils down historically to price. So what am I going to be able to sell my coffee at? Am I going to be able to sell my coffee at a higher price than what my actual cost of production was? Because I had to pay labor. I had to spend time cultivating my plants. I had to spend time, whether it be fumigating or working on regenerative practices. I'm investing in taking care of my farm and taking care of my crop so that I can yield a good result. So am I going to be able to recoup not only just my cost of production, but decent margin to be able to move forward? So that price has been more or less the top priority for farmers the last, 2 decades. On top of that, you have issues like climate. It's becoming, weather patterns are changing, whether it be more rain or less rain, whether it be higher temperatures or in some instances, lower, more variable in terms of weather patterns, et cetera. Farmers are having to look for crops and varietals that are more resilient to that, or they're having to be innovative with how they're further introducing more nutrients to their farm, to their soil, and ensuring their soil health and everything else. But those are probably the top 2 challenges today. Okay. And then the third for farmer would be access, right? So often is the case where I'm kind of locked into the options I know. Who is in my market who could potentially buy my coffee? Mm-hmm. If you're very fortunate, if you're very lucky, you may have a relationship with a roaster or a buyer internationally that can help you to get a more established, better price, more secure price. But for many producers throughout the world, I would say the majority of producers throughout the world, they are very much tied to the volatility of that C market, of kind of lumped into this commodity element of the business. And so that is a key challenge for them too. And the challenges they face together are just that, like we talked about before, the ability to predict. So the ability to know who I'm dealing with, whether that be from a cost standpoint, a relational standpoint, or a quality standpoint, so that I can ensure that consistency is there. And the ability to forecast and allow my business to be profitable. So based on the variabilities of the market, that market volatility can be a major opportunity for those who are very financially savvy and are playing the trading market well. It can also be an incredible risk for those that aren't in that world day in and day out. So all of those factors are major challenges for both farmers and roasters.
All right. Thanks. That was great explanation of it really helps me better understand where you are filling that need. Speaking of, you also mentioned that they can tell better stories. Do you have any stories you can share about some of the success stories you've had with some of your roasters and farmer relationships?
Yeah, and I'll kind of walk this through holistically. So when we began Bridging Tables, again, like I mentioned, one of the things that was really apparent to me was just, I've told you I was a recruiter in my past life, right? So
Yeah.
just the level of talent that I was interacting with day in and day out in the emerging markets, the vigor, the resilience, the ability to utilize limited resources to build something incredible and ingenuitive. So for us, when we began Bridging Tables, it was really with this conviction. We started the first relationships that we began with were focused in this region in Honduras called the Agalta region, which historically has not been sold in the international market. It's a portion of Honduras which is mostly commercial and definitively doesn't have a lot of access for these types of relationships like we've talked about thus far. And our core belief, like I mentioned, was no matter how big you were, no matter how small you were, if you had the right talent and quality, you should be able to have an access to the table, right? A seat at the table and be able to have those conversations. And so we really focused in the Agalta region and farmers within the Agalta region to try to provide them access to the international market. And then we focused on, small regional roasters. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. So we focused in Nashville early on. And there's an outlying city not far away from Nashville called Murfreesboro, which is not known for the best coffee, but there's an excellent roastery in Murfreesboro called Brass Horn. And they're a relatively smaller roaster, right? Excellent work, high quality, but a relatively smaller customer from a volume standpoint, at least historically. So we were able to connect the team at Brass Horn with a farmer who had 1 hectare. So that's a very small farm. His farm was actually like about 1.5 acres. A hectare is just over 2 acres. So we were able to connect Kilvet, who is this smallholder farmer in this unknown region of Honduras in the specialty market, with a roaster not in the middle of coffee land, right? But kind of in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And they were able to forge this relationship that was very mutually beneficial. So small to small in different parts of the coffee world, being able to connect, form a direct relationship in a way that, one, met both of their needs, allowed them that predictability, sustainability that we talked about earlier, the ability to build the relationship. But 2, was mutually beneficial from a financial standpoint, right? It was a good price for Jeremy. And for Kilvet at the time, that first transaction, I believe, was an increase of like 300% of the gross profit margin that he had seen up to date. Over the course of a 4-year turn, Kilvet was able to, through our network, continue to build relationships and then got introduced to more people to where now he's got his entire farm sold. So all of his coffees are sold, and he's seen an increase in some of his coffees up to over 1,000%, an increase of gross profit margin. So this is someone who, when we met Kilvet, his grandfather had told him, hey, there's no room for you in coffee. There's no future for you in coffee. The market's changing. Here, I've got your coyote fees. Go to the States, go make a better living, send it back home, and then you can come home when you're done, right? It's effectively what he was saying. And when we met Kilvet, we told him we thought we had an opportunity based on his quality to help him connect with somebody. He took a risk that first year and it paid off, right? So now Kilvet is growing like we discussed, right? He decided to stay. He got married. He started a family. He's investing in his community. And not only is he investing in his community, but the regional area of Honduras looks at Kilvet like, kind of like the poster child of what can be once you're able to build and invest in your farm in these kinds of ways and make these kinds of relationships. And so for me, that's a phenomenal story to highlight, because not only were we able to be a part of two people from opposite ends of the hemisphere to connect, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for them to do so in a way that's mutually beneficial for their business and allows them the opportunity to flourish where they're planted, right?
Mm-hmm.
They continue to invest in their community. And for farmers, for pickers and farmers and laborers in the coffee industry and other agricultural industries across the emerging markets, those industries are becoming tougher and tougher. And so that's part of why we see mass migration, is there's not opportunity. And so you have
Mm-hmm.
people that are really forced with this question of, how do I provide for my family and look for the future? And so for us, it was, kind of like a triple win. Able to provide the business opportunity, able to provide Kilvet an opportunity to invest in his community, which ultimately is what he's always wanted, right? So,
Oh yeah, that's a great story. That actually reminds me is some of the other coffee shops I've talked to, and some of them that I've worked with locally near me. They do have relationships between them roasting and their growers, and they'll often come and visit each other.
yeah.
But I still hear of just general struggles, like, yeah, we're doing a little bit as much as we can for them, and those type of terms. And I'm wondering if, what's one thing they could do to improve that relationship on that financial level, so they're not just looking for little things they can do for each other, but actually, creating that sustainable, a way to financially be sustainable for each other.
Mm-hmm. I think it again goes back to communication, right?
Okay.
Which sometimes is really difficult, especially when you're operating cross-culturally.
Mhm.
And is even more difficult when, the entity or the service provider you're leaning on to provide the actual financing of this good and managing it has limitations, right? So maybe I'm working with I've built that relationship over 15 years, and we have a myriad of folks that we work with who have had long-standing relationships with producers or roasters for 15, sometimes even 20 years, that are moving their relationships into our model because it's more beneficial to both of them, right? It's more beneficial to them from a financial standpoint, like you mentioned, and it's also more transparent. Meaning, I'm a firm believer in, I guess, two different phrases. One, a rising tide raises all ships, and then two, the potency of education. And so for us, what education looks like has a lot to do with just being transparent. So the ability for a farmer to see what that final contract was, for a roaster to see all the details that were involved in the contract, cost of goods, right? So what was I actually paying the farmer themselves? What was the cost of milling it, the processing? What was the boat? What was the financing terms that I've identified? What was my real cost? And for the farmer too, oftentimes it's easy for a farmer in an emerging market to say, hey, I sold my cup of my coffee for like $2 or $3 a pound, right? And then I look and I see all these commercials for Starbucks or all these, whatever specialty roaster that I'm looking at. Maybe I've seen the big commercial brand. Maybe I'm looking at the specialty brand, and I see they're selling a cup of coffee for $4, right? And I'm doing the math and I'm saying, wow, that doesn't add up. And they feel taken advantage of. But the reality is there's a lot of costs in there that they wouldn't have been able to do that is there. And it is providing a real service. And so for us, part of it is providing the access, the insight, the transparency of where was that money going, right? And who was being paid what, and what did it cost to do what? Allowing both parties the ability to see what those costs are and to build that trust, right? So trust is a major component. And so you're asking what can help that? I think one of the biggest things is trust, and how do we build trust and show up for each other? And so when I think of trust, and I would imagine some of the people that especially if they're folks that are emphasizing a relational based business, they're going to be looking out for each other. And this is something that we've seen time and time and again, where farmers historically have been paid lower prices and roasters have been accustomed to lower prices. But when a roaster is able to pay someone based on cost of production and actually what the real value is of the coffee, and not just based on the market, that builds trust. And so an example would be that I can give, we had some farmers that were working with another roaster who is not from the most coffee savvy area of the world, but is a phenomenal roaster. Not the Portlands or the LAs, the Chicagos, or even the Kansas Cities, right? Like, or the New Yorks, but from, a reasonably small town. And they treated this group of farmers really well for 2 years when the prices were low. And they showed effort. They showed the belief in what they were doing. They made an investment from their standpoint, right? Well, guess what? The coffee prices went sky high. And when most of the farmers were defaulting on their contracts, saying, sorry, I don't have the coffee anymore because now I can make more money in the market, right? This group of farmers stood true with those roasters and said, hey, we're going to honor a better price for you because you were there for us.
That's awesome.
Right? Which is it's a nice story, but I can't emphasize the rarity is that when I work and talk with other people who are fifth generation coffee farmers who own an importing business and their family won't even sell them their coffee. Right.
Wow.
So the ability to build that level of trust, I can't emphasize. And this is one-on-one, like human connection, right? And we're looking after one another and we're able to build that's something, we're a part of something that's bigger than us. That goes a whole other level of camaraderie, teamwork, collaboration, everything in that fashion.
Okay. Well, so that key financial transparency between the two really makes a big difference in solidifying that relationship. That's great. Now I'm going to look real quick at the other side, the side that we work on is supporting these industries. What advice would you have for an entrepreneur looking to create meaningful change in the coffee industry?
I would say there's a handful of places to dive into, but I would say in a world that is, we hear, whether in this industry or not, we're hearing all the buzzwords of technology and AI and all those kinds of things. And I would say what's going to last and what I think history has told us will last is, yes, there are technological revolutions, but the hardest things to build are often the most durable. And what I mean by that are these elements of human capital, meaning relationally driven organizations, especially in hospitality, my customer service, what my emphasis is on, how I do customer success, whatever business I am, whether B2B or B2C. I think that's what's going to continue to differentiate brands is, yes, there is data behind trendy marketing and all this other kind of thing, but how you treat the person in front of you is inevitably going to pay dividends in the long run, especially if you do it day in and day out with consistency. So I say that as a backdrop, as a philosophy for whatever problem within the industry you're looking to tackle, how you're building relationships, how you're cultivating relationships, and how you're focused on the things that aren't scalable, right? Like the actual teams and processes and how we treat people. That's going to pay, the greatest long-term effect for all of those folks that you're working alongside and working for.
Yeah, definitely. The teams and the processes and working together on the strategies, understanding which one's the best way to move forward with what you're helping with and your company. Definitely, I've seen that pay dividends for all sorts of companies, whether or not they're beverage industry or not.
Right. And I think it specifically to the beverage industry, right? There's going to be increasing pressure, especially for the consumer side of things, on procurement, right? As we see macroeconomic trends that are more nerve-wracking, right? We see a lot of different trends that are telling us that the consumers are going to be more cost conscious, or what are they looking at? What are they focused on? One, they're either going to be consistently within the specialty space, or two, they're going to be very price conscious. And so the ways in which I think my invitation would be for people to think creatively and to look at these problems and see where is there opportunity for solutions that can both provide, let's call it a real market-based solution, while at the same time providing real value in that procurement process. I think those kinds of solutions are going to be the ones that are going to be real game changers for the next few years.
Yeah, I think those companies are kind of looking at things creatively and collectively together, just not looking for that one-off, but coming together over several ideas and bubbling up the best ones, testing those. That's always, I've seen those companies move forward the fastest. They're also have that ability to fail fast and be okay with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But then
get in my neck of the woods.
Yeah. No, all good.
Yeah. So I got a couple more questions. The last two here. One's kind of fun. So we've been talking about coffee and pour coffee, but what is your favorite beverage?
Water.
Water. All right.
I mean, I've learned not to take it for granted, right? Water is one of those things that I think we often go overlooked, but no, I'm sipping water right now. But outside of water, it would be coffee. I'm not a major, soda guy. Every now and then, I love a really good cane sugar Coca-Cola out of the glass bottle, but mostly it's coffee and water for me.
Any particular kind of coffee you gravitate towards? There's so many kinds.
Well, I'm very spoiled, right? I get to drink a lot of high quality coffee from producers and friends all across the world. So our coffees change up routinely, but I would say Honduran coffee tastes like home. Right?
Oh, excellent. Okay.
That's kind of where the journey for specialty coffee began for me. I love a good East African coffee. Ethiopia, of course, is the birthplace of coffee, but you get phenomenal coffees, not only out of Ethiopia, but Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya. I mean, there are fantastic coffees. And then you have some other fantastic coffees out of other unknown origins, like Indians produce great coffee. There's good coffee out of Nepal. There's good coffee out of the Pacific Asian region. So there's all kinds of good coffees throughout. But if I had to answer which one is my tried and true, it would probably be Honduran coffee.
Sure. Yeah. I'm currently kind of diving into the Rwandas lately. So yeah, it always changes.
Yeah.
All right. And then finally, if somebody would like to look into getting help from you, whether it be a roaster or a grower, those two end users, or where can they find you? And do you have any, events, promotions, or anything further you'd like to talk about in bridging tables?
Yeah, no doubt. So I would say first and foremost, just our website, bridgingtables.com is probably the best place to find us if they're looking for any kind of assistance or looking at assistance, whether you're a producer, whether you're a mill, or whether you're a roaster. We'd love to get to know you, collaborate, learn what your needs are, what you're looking to solve, and see if there's some ways that we can help you to creatively solve that and open up opportunities for you. Secondly, I would say, again, going back to the two phrases I like to hold near and dear, a rising tide raises all ships. We're a firm believer in bringing various stakeholders across the industry together with this belief that it's not a product that's going to solve or add durability in the industry. It's the people. And there's so much legacy, wisdom, and knowledge and experience within the industry. So the kind of the opportunity and the solutions, they're already there. They just need to be unlocked. And so how do we bring those right people together and allow them to collaborate, allow them to build relationships, allow them to begin to flourish together? So we got to host an event we called Looking Forward right before a trade show in Houston, roughly, just over a month ago, right before the Specialty Coffee Association trade show in Houston. And that was phenomenal. We got to bring, a really special boutique importer, a person who is a coffee producer and an exporter and has a retail shop who focuses specifically on regenerative ag, is doing some incredible work in regenerative agriculture, a roaster, and then two of the kind of world-renowned producers across East Africa and then also in Honduras together to have this dialogue, right, around kind of what are they seeing from and what obstacles are they facing, where's the current market at, where are they currently at, and then how do we collectively move things forward? So where are there opportunities for collaboration, where are there opportunities for us to grow together? That was the first of a handful of events that we're going to be hosting over the course of the next year. We're targeting hosting them in a few specific regions. So I would say be on the lookout for us either on LinkedIn or on our website, potentially on Instagram, for where those events will be. And we're excited to be hosting those. So those are some collaborative efforts that we'll be hosting over the course of the next year.
All right. I'll have ways to connect with Matt Hayes and Following Bridging Tables in the show notes as well. Matt, thank you for sharing your story on how you are helping the industry by giving everyone a seat at the table to improve the coffee experience. This has been really educational. I really hope there's a couple of roasters sitting there saying, there's just that one thing I missed, and this might be it. So this is where the Harvest to Pour, I hope, always somehow connects people and makes a change, improve this beverage industry or any other industry. Matt, again, thank you again for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Harvest to Pour, the business of beverages with Matthew Shipp. Check the show notes for our guest contact information and connect with Matthew Shipp on LinkedIn today.